Imagine on a fine July morning, you go to your local grocery store and find it closed for no apparent reason. Your immediate impulse is to go check on your neighbors, the owners of the store. However, nothing could have prepared you for what you are going to witness. 10 pairs of feet dangling, motionless from the ceiling, pale lips, and twisted necks. Good morning, everyone. This is Mindbrews on the Spot, the podcast where we explore stories from all walks of life. And today we are here to discuss the original Burari death case and a recent development that no one has seen coming. I am Shivangi, your host, and here with me I have Rudrako, a social psychology enthusiast and my colleague.
Hey everyone, Rudrako here. Shivangi, why don't you give us an overview of the original Burari case?
Sure. So before we go ahead, I would like to remind everyone that this is a group discussion based podcast. And now for the overview of the original case. So what happened was on July 1st, 2018, 11 members of the Chandawat family were found dead in their home in Burari in Delhi. 10 of them were found hanging in the courtyard blindfolded with their mouths taped and hands and legs bound. The eldest member, Narayani Devi, was found strangled in another room. Initially, the police and the public speculated on various theories ranging from murder to mass suicide. The family background was quite ordinary. They ran a grocery shop and a plywood business at the same time. The family included Narayani Devi, her two sons, Bhuvnesh and Lalit, their wives and children, and her widowed daughter Pratibha. Later during the podcast, we will discover their family tree in more detail. The shocking discovery led to a lot of speculation and media coverage.
On an interesting note, however, after the case was filed under the police, a set of journals were discovered in the household that were allegedly, quote unquote, written by the grandfather of the family, Bhopal Singh Chandawat, who had in fact passed away in 2007.
Right, so these notes and diaries were basically found at the crime scene, these notes were basically the key to understanding what happened. But more importantly, these notes are what piqued the interest of the public and why there was a huge public outrage about the case. So, what did the investigation reveal about these notes and rituals?
So, according to the notes, the family believed they were performing a ritual for their salvation. The instructions were meticulous, detailing how to tie their own hands and assist each other in doing so. Lalit Chandawat, one of the sons, in fact the youngest, believed he was receiving guidance from his deceased father through these notes. The family seemed to think that the ritual would lead to some form of spiritual awakening and not death. But before we further delve into the case, I think we should analyze the history and the background of the family even before the incident itself took place, because there is definitely a lot to unravel there.
So, for the background of the family, the Chandawat family lived in Burari, a suburb of Delhi. The family ran a grocery shop and a plywood business. Members included Narayani Devi, who was 80 and was the mother of Bhuvnesh, Lalit, and Pratibha. Pratibha was a widowed woman who had a daughter named Priyanka, and Bhuvnesh had a wife named Savita, whose kids were Neetu, Menaka, and Dhruv. Lalit was the youngest son of the family, and his wife's name was Tina, and had a son named Shivam, who was only 15 years of age. Do you want to talk more about the incident?
Yeah, so according to police investigation, the family had been through quite a few sets of ups and downs throughout their history, especially after Narayani Devi's husband passed away. As far as the case files go, right after Bhopal Singh Chandawat passed away in 2007 due to natural causes, of course, The family had a marked increase in, let's say, social isolation, which resulted in the financial situation of the family deteriorating rapidly. The responsibility of the financial wealth and well-being of the family would naturally fall upon the eldest son, right? At least that's what one would assume. But what ended up happening was Lalit, the youngest son in the family, ended up taking the leadership role because apparently, under his guidance and decisions, the family happened to expand their businesses very rapidly post 2011, and prosperity kind of returned to the Chandawat household. But little did anyone know that Lalit had already started sifting through the journals post his father's death, and later would claim in the very same journals that it was the directions of Bhopal Singh Chandawat that led the family back to prosperity.
So, what actually happened after Bhopal Singh's death, right? His younger son Lalit Chandawat claimed that his father's spirit had started communicating with him. Lalit said that his father guided him on how to lead the family, ensure their well being, tell them what to do, how to sit, how to act, how to behave when someone comes. There were detailed uh, rules and ideas written in these diaries. This communication, quote unquote, reportedly began through dreams and later through more direct interactions, where Lalit would sometimes appear to be in a trance, claiming to be possessed by his father's spirit. Now, this was apparently assumed that the family members would stand, and they were used to these trances and they were used to these possessions that Lalit would have of his grandfather. But let's talk more about the ritualistic aspect of this case.
As far as the journals go, which are, available to read on the public, at least some sections of them, Lalit claimed that under the guidance of his father's spirit, um, there were certain rituals that the family had to follow to ensure that the family prospers. Apparently, grandfather Chandawat couldn't leave the family in the hands of anyone else's leadership. Hence, he chose Lalit as his conduit, and hence, Lalit, as his own father's medium, convinced the family that they needed to perform specific rituals to achieve salvation and protection. Now, the family's belief in these practices grew stronger as they perceived Lilith's guidance as beneficial and protective. So, about specific diary entries and listener discretion always advised. We do have a few publicly released entries for the diary itself, which Shivangi and I did go through.
Some of the entries were very fascinating to read, honestly. Things and lines that were like, sit down tied, that's all, keep faith. If anyone does anything wrong, everyone will suffer. And as much strength that you have, that much grace you will receive. There were many more diary entries such as those. The final ritual, when we talk about the final ritual, there were diary entries that stated in the Bar Puja, where they will keep water in a cup, and when it changes color, I will appear and save you. I was believed to be the grandfather Chandawat. This line indicated that family believed in a miraculous intervention that would save them during the ritual. There were even lines such as, you all have to close your eyes and untie your hands. And, if the last day, if you forget, you will forget, but your end will come, right? So Lalit basically believed he was because he was receiving these instructions from his deceased father and he was documenting it in these diaries. He thought, and the family in itself thought, following this Bar Puja that was again very meticulously detailed in the diary, was the only way that they would attain salvation, and that was also because the grandfather will come and save them through it.
This, in fact, actually, in my opinion, was a very profound case of, mass hysteria within a family, which is something we'll touch upon later. But, in fact, they happen to believe that to bring their, grandfather Chandawat back into the family in a corporeal form, they would have to go through with the final ritual where all of them would have to be blindfolded and hands tied and hung. This was in fact the ritual of the Bar Puja, which would enable grandfather Chandawat, Bhopal Chandawat, to come back in corporeal form and rejoin the family in this world.
But where did all of it start? I mean, we do know that once he passed away, Lalit had taken the control and leadership in the house. But what we've understood and what the police have understood from the case was that because Lalit was having these trances and these communication with the grandfather, it was a supposed guidance of his father's spirit. So because of which Lalit introduced various rituals aimed at appeasing the spirit of his father and ensuring the family's prosperity. These rituals became more and more elaborate over time. And, Lalit even convinced the family that they needed to perform specific rituals. Otherwise, grandfather is going to get mad and we have to perform them. So, these rituals, if they were not performed, they were punished also in the family. And if they did not, this was the only way that they would achieve salvation and protection. The family's belief in these practices grew stronger as they perceived Lalit's guidance as financial and overall beneficial and protective. Because as we know, Lalit was the one that was able to bring the family back into finance. So where does the writing of the diaries start? Lalit started documenting the instructions and guidance he claimed to receive from his father's spirit in a series of diaries. Now, these diaries obviously are very detailed and they contain so many instructions and specific details for various rituals and practices. It also outlines the steps, even including the final Bad Puja, which ultimately led to the family's demise. The instructions were very, very precise and left very little room for interpretation also. So basically, this belief was just so strong and this united the family in such a way that it led the entire family to participate in these rituals. They would basically agree to everything Lalit would say without even protesting, right? And it's both fascinating and tragic, honestly. What signs do you think, Rudrako, led up to the incident that might have indicated something was wrong?
Well, as per the neighborhood and people belonging to it, they ran a particularly successful grocery shop that in fact expanded to a plywood business under Lalit's command. They were pretty well regarded within the neighborhood and pretty well respected, well known, and hence the neighbors went to check on them once they saw that the grocery shop hadn't been opened for a while and no one had been responding on that particular day, right? So they seemed from the outside to be a very close-knit and a tight group of people who followed certain ideologies to the very T, and they seemed united almost to a fault, which honestly by itself could have been a big red flag within society, but honestly most people just assumed it's pretty wholesome. However, one of the blatant red flags that were often ignored by the larger society around them, and in fact by the family itself, was Lalit's increasing obsessive behavior towards these rituals. As time went on, these journals that span over a time of 11 years, the rituals kept getting more and more elaborate, precise, and oftentimes harder to follow through with. However, Lalit's obsession with meticulously following them and punishing family members who would fail in doing so. And on top of that, the journals, in fact, mentioning that if you cannot follow a certain rule on a certain day, make sure it is followed on the day after, given terms and conditions. It could have come off as a very big red flag, which was apparently socially quite visible according to neighbors around and about.
So basically, what I'm understanding is that it's a combination of strong familial ties and a sort of shared delusion that is basically led to this tragedy. And this is a case that raises many questions about mental health and family dynamics, which we will discuss in the podcast soon. But what I think is important to touch is the media and the public reaction to this incident. The Burari case received such extensive media coverage with so many major outlets like NDTV, Hindustan Times, providing continuous updates and analysis. It was even described as one of the most shocking and eerie incidents in recent memory. I remember it being all over the news when I was also younger, and the incident spurred various documentaries and reports, and even a Netflix series, if you guys are interested, you should watch, called House of Secrets: The Burari Deaths, which delves into the psychological aspects and the family dynamics that were involved, and possibly why and how they took the decision that they did. Now, for the public, I'm sure the neighbor who went inside and found them hanging was in absolute shock. I mean, the entire neighborhood was so close to them, right? And still, somehow they had no idea that this was going on at home, that there were these detailed rituals that were taking place that were taken so seriously, And meanwhile, the public, with the images and the videos that were shown, I think I remember some of the videos and images were actually supposed to be blurred, even because of how bad the reactions were and how people were just so scared of what has happened. They were horrified, and yet there's something so intriguing about this case that that's why it piqued people's interest, and that's why people kept going back to it, asking for more. I mean, coming up with speculations, things like there are 11 pipes on the side of the wall, right? And even in the Netflix show, they cover it, where they think that this is through which the souls must have escaped. But later found out that, it is just another speculation, another make-believe story to, maybe even done by the media departments. Who knows, right? But many were expressing, many public people, right? They were expressing disbelief over the family's actions. Even the neighbors, in fact, because again, they really, really could not believe that the family would take a step like this. They seemed like such a joyful, happy family who would, take part in the neighborhood, volunteer, and they were responsible for the groceries for a good number of people, right? So the social media, I remember, was abuzz with theories and speculations, again, like the pipe incident, and, about the family's mental state and the influence of superstition, like what superstition really does to a family. Some neighbors and acquaintances even described the family as devout and well-behaved, making the incident even more baffling. And mental health professionals were commenting, and all of this was highlighted, that there is such a huge need of awareness, especially in Indian families, and the intervention in cases of shared psychosis is very much needed, because it can lead to such steps and tragedies which are based on extreme religious and superstitious and spiritual beliefs. So, what is more interesting about this case, other than just facts, is the psychological and the sociological aspect to it. Can you please tell us more about it, Rudrakho?
Okay. So this case can be very easily and clearly attributed to something that is called a shared psychotic disorder, or pardon my French, folie aux plaisirs, which is basically, boiled down to the very core of it. A bunch of people who share a common belief system or a common thought process in general, which has no real scientific blueprint and has been inspired by one dominant person in the equation.
So, sounds like a cult to me then. Can you tell me, maybe, is there a difference between a cult and what happened here? Or do you think they're the same thing?
Okay, so in my opinion, when you talk about a cult will often leave some space for the people involved to question. It's at least if you're not a cult that reloads guns on weekends. But in general, a cult will operate more like an undercover religion, where one person got a little too creative one night and wrote out an entire religion of themselves. Kudos to that person. But a shared psychosis is often a more illness of the mind, because it starts as a belief inspired by an emotion. Hopefully, in this case, it was, I suppose, a lack of guidance for the family itself. Maybe hope that they would get guidance from their late grandfather Chandawat. But this is majorly a case of unsupervised religious belief propagated by one dominant person. And again, we all know who that is. Bhopal Chandawat's own personal medium / son Lalit. Which caused the entire family to share in this thought process, which, even if you had space to question, you would be very, very severely punished for it. But one interesting thing about this case specifically, and a little fun fact about this thing, if you go to Google and look for examples of shared psychosis, guess what comes up as the first example? But either way, a very interesting thing about this entire situation was that usually the dominant person who starts propagating these beliefs remains at least halfway disillusioned by the principles they are propagating. As in, they are not always 100% convinced by what they themselves are propagating, and a lot of it is a means of manipulating the people around them. However, in this case, there is a lot of evidence that Lalit himself was in fact a staunch believer in everything that his late father was quote-unquote instructing him with. So this in fact turned into a very a very researched case amongst a lot of psychologists, and in fact it is in fact currently in the curriculum for a lot of psychology higher study courses abroad. But okay, back to our in-house cult specialist. Shivangi, what do you think? Again, let's not mention Scientology, but what do you think, Shivangi? Like you mentioned, this was very similar to a cult. However, again, very uniquely, this was a in-house, in-family situation. So what do you think?
I think it was a cult where he didn't even have to go out to find his followers. He had them right at home, right in the palm of his hand, because he is the son. And it's easier for him to continue doing what he was and propagating what his grandfather was. If his grandfather had these diaries and like these entries, and Lalit believed in them so much, that means the grandfather was very successful in integrating these very thoughts and beliefs into his own children.
Oh, sorry. I think you mean Lalit's dad, because he was a daddy's boy apparently.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So, as I was saying, if his dad was so good at making his own children believe and putting these beliefs in them, right? then I think the family themselves were already on the path of, believing these rituals and this kind of lifestyle. This was normal for them. So if this is something that is normal for them, you really can't question, something that they have done and, put it in a bucket of right and wrong. Yes, there are religious texts that do imply that taking one's life is a sin, but apart from that, this to them, God was secondary to their own father. Lalit's father was the main, like the most important person in Lalit's life. And if Lalit really believed in his dad's work and word this much, then to him, no other better God then, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are religions out there that often have your own ancestors as your deities. And perhaps because Lalit and Co were raised with such beliefs from the childhood itself, they were so ready to accept that, Bhopal Singh, after passing away, could, entrance Lalit and have him write journals for him, which the family would so meticulously follow down to a 15-year-old child. Again, let's remind ourselves, a 15-year-old child is a ninth grader. So even down to a ninth grader, we have people meticulously following unsupervised religious practices. So this honestly all comes down to, I mean, in my personal opinion, I think the Burari case specifically could only happen at some very specific religious hotspots of the world. And what bigger religious hotspot in the world than India, right? Because religious mania is a major driving force within the country itself, which, in my opinion, kind of caused the whole thing.
And another interesting thing that I think is that, as you mentioned, he's a ninth grader, right? How did he not talk to his friends? I think everyone has that question. One of the things was that there was a strict rule in the diary that said that you are not allowed to speak about the ongoings of the household to anyone besides Lalit himself. In fact, the family members within themselves were also not talking to each other about what is personally happening to them, or any conversation that they were having with Lalit or anyone. There was no communication that is going on. So imagine there is just one road and that all leads to Lalit for every single one of them. They are absolutely barred from speaking about anything that is like, you pick up a glass of milk at home and you're not allowed to tell that to anyone outside. So clearly, even the 15-year-old was not talking to anyone. I mean, I'm sure if someone had mentioned something, even a little bit, there would be at least even a little bit, a smidge of curiosity, which would bring people in, and that would disrupt the flow of, the events that happened. But, over to you, Rudraku. What do you think?
I mean, in my opinion, this was very meticulously crafted on Lalit's behalf, even if he believed the whole ritual situation or not, because it has been very very few rare instances in history have shown one man or woman being able to inspire this kind of blind faith in such a large number of people, right? Without people even questioning their instructions even once. Yes, I agree, that does sound very much like a cult, except I also do not think most of the people in the family had a choice. Because what do you do when the person feeding you, giving you a roof over your head and a bed to sleep on, tells you one fine day that you have to get on a stool and tie your hands and eyes so that your grandfather can come save you? What do you can you even do at that point?
I mean, I agree. It's something where I think it's also down to the point where they're not even being exposed to, different things. They are just so kept within their own family. And there is a certain, because he is considered the elder, like at this point of the family. So, I think that because of this shared psychosis that the family had, and they were not being exposed to anything. I mean, I get it. You can't really, what do you say against the father, right? I mean, he is the one who's, like you said, putting the roof on the head, giving the food in your mouths, and you and they themselves must have been following this from the grandfather, according to our speculation. So an interesting note, by the way, is that the handwriting analysis revealed that the diaries were written by Priyanka, the daughter of Pratibha, and Neetu, the elder daughter of Bhavnesh, and were supposedly dictated by Lalit. And Lalit is the mastermind again of this incident, right? So one of the questions that I've been having in my mind, these diaries have been planned and written for 11 years. Now, Lalit obviously must have had some sort of shock when his father died. Do you think when he started writing this diary, when he set out to go on this venture, that his family is going to perform these certain rituals and they're going to follow this kind of lifestyle, did he think of an end moment and this Bar Puja, maybe let's not say 11 years before, maybe like 10 years or 9 years? Was it a plan in the making, or was it just so happened to be one day, maybe because he's impulsive, and that's again another aspect of how mentally unstable he was? What do you think it was?
If I were to make it, so in my opinion, Lalit as a person, in terms of the journal entries, they were pretty sporadic in terms of patterns. There was never a particular final crescendo to the whole symphony of psychosis that was present in the journal. But I do believe Lalit aimed for a final ending to the whole thing, just was not ready for it to be death itself. I feel like his delusions themselves prepared him to get to that state, and hence Lalit in turn prepared the rest of the family to get there. So again, when you are deluded, you don't plan ahead, or he wasn't a mastermind as such. You only can clap with two hands. So it was half Lalit and half the family's staunch belief in him. If you have a certain number of followers in your life, you will start acting like an autocrat in that situation. And that's exactly what Lalit did. He was given the crown and he wore it with pride within the house. But he didn't really have a lot of preparation. However creative the plans for the rituals themselves were. Actually, on that note, let me inform you guys regarding what the final ritual looked like. The diaries, in fact, instructed the family to prepare for a significant ritual on the night of June 30th, 2018. The ritual was called the infamous Bad Puja. It was meant to achieve salvation for the entire family and bring grandfather Chandavat back in corporeal form to save the family from dying. A lot of instructions included tying their own hands, covering their faces blindfolded, and again climbing on stools and hanging themselves. In fact, Narayani Devi herself was found strangled with no information till date as to who exactly was the one. Again, it was speculated that it was Lalit himself who strangled her, but the 10 members of the family followed these particular instructions to the T. In fact, their form, quote unquote, with them hanging, all 10 of them, from the ceiling of the house, was meant to mimic the bud tree, quote unquote, which I suppose is an interesting way of going about it, but definitely has a lot of unsupervised religious stigma associated with the concept.
And to take from the diary entries itself, it was said that everyone will tie their own hands, and when the kriya, that is ritual, is done, then everyone will help each other untie their hands. And during another entry stated, during the Bad Puja, the color of the water kept in the bowl will change, indicating the presence of the divine spirit. When this happens, the ritual is successful and we will be blessed. right? So one diary entry even read that Lalit believes that he is being possessed, as we know, by his father's spirit, and that is why he is the one who has to tie everyone's hands, and he will untie his hands first. That is how it is going to work. So there was maybe like a gamla kept outside, and there was water filled in that gamla. They were waiting for the water to turn red, apparently, according to the entries in the diary, right? But fun fact actually is that some of the people had their hands tied and their mouths taped. Almost all the young kids, the youngest son obviously, and the girls and the kids were the ones who had their hands tied and their maybe like mouths tied, so that it felt like it. When you look at the scene, it feels like as if some of them may have protested towards the end but were forced to go through with it. And that in itself strikes a chord, and which is the entire reason, one of the reasons actually the media has such a big problem with this case, and why the media is so sensitive about it. So yeah, this ritual was again done. And again, another diary entry also said that the human body is temporary but the soul lives on, and people believe, with good faith especially, if anything, at least maybe the souls of the family members are now with grandfather Chundawat. So hopefully, that is the case. So, talking about mental health and family dynamics, right? There is a reason that we are bringing up a case that is almost 6 years old, right? And because there have been recent developments that are now being compared to the Burari deaths that happened in 2018. The developments are where there is another case that has happened on the same date of 2024, July 1st, which is now being called Burari Deaths 2.0. What have you heard about these developments?
So, on July 1st, 2024, this is a story from a very small Ravdi village in, again, excuse my pronunciation, Alirajpur district in Madhya Pradesh. 5 members of the Dodwa family were found dead in their home under circumstances which were very, very eerily similar to the Burari case. Rakesh Dodwa, his wife Lalita, their 2 sons were found hanging while their daughter was found on the floor. There was no suicide note, and the initial investigation points towards a possible connection to financial stress regarding the family. But many eyebrows have been raised given its twin incident that happened in 2018, right?
People, are really comparing this to they're calling it the original Burari case and the Burari case 2.0 that has happened recently. And it's very disturbing that you would think that is a one-time incident that you wouldn't even imagine it occurring in the first place, and then it occurring yet again 6 years later. So, there are so many similarities in this case that, in both these cases, yet there are so many dissimilarities as well, which we are going to discuss. But, mind you, there isn't much information out there because I think they've learned from the last time. So media coverage is very tight, and, the investigation itself is very closed off and tight right now. So there is not much information. So we are going to go off on whatever we know and speculate accordingly. So starting off, both incidents involve multiple family members found dead under mysterious circumstances with no clear motive or explanation initially. In both cases, there is a lack of struggle and the victims appeared to have participated willingly. And the exact date of the incident is what catches everyone's attention, which is July 1st. That has happened on 2018, July 1st and July 1st in 2024. So, that adds another layer of intrigue. And it's a very big, chilling coincidence, right? Like, have there been any theories about these deaths occurred? Do you think that?
Again, this oddly enough is another case that in fact would be very specific to India, because it is a widely known problem where the farmer community specifically is often under big financial distress within the country, right? So the natural conclusion that one would draw in place of investigation would be, that the family was under some kind of debt or financial problem, and hence they chose to end their lives in the process, right? Because there have been hundreds and hundreds of cases every year for decades now. But financial and analysis states that it, as likely as it could not have been a propellant for the entire situation happening. And on top of that, the forensic team has been involved, and they also have been analyzing the digital communication for any clues. The community background suggests that Rakesh Dodwa did face financial difficulties, but again, as the reports suggest, it wasn't entirely the major propellant. However, it is the only thread that we can climb on at the moment.
In my opinion, honestly, I really do not think that these two cases are actually similar, other than the fact that it happened on the same date. Had this happened in December of any year, I don't think it would be such a big outrage or something. I think it's because of the way they suicided and the date that they chose to suicide. Because come to think of it, there is absolutely no ritualistic or spiritual belief that is linked to their suicide. It is purely financial problems, as Rudrako told, that it's a farmer's distress. It's always there. It's always been present in India. It always will be. I mean, God knows when that is going to be solved, right? But the point is that, because there is no suicide note, there is absolutely no letters, and even the girl's body is on the floor. Nothing. It's honestly a case that the police would usually consider open and shut, really, because even post-mortem examinations, after being scrutinized, they're not finding anything but financial distress or debt being the major issue. No clear motive or explanation is there, yes, but according to major speculation and what is found so far, that is the case. And Rakesh Dodo was known for this. He was known to have financial difficulties and was working in Gujarat to support his family, right? There was no prior indication of any ritualistic, as I said, or religious inclination similar to the Burari case. Burari case was heavily shrouded with the fact that this is absolutely only because the grandfather has been possessing Lalit, and there's a whole spiritual belief track going on over there, right? The family, yes, was relatively isolated, and there were no immediate neighbors reporting unusual activities before the incident. So, coming to the current status, right? What are the police doing? The police are investigating possible motives. They're including financial stress, mental health issues, and external influences in the case as well. They're being very meticulous, and the forensic teams are analyzing evidence, including fingerprints and any digital communication, like Rudrako said, right? And community members are obviously based standard procedure. So, yes, both the Burari case and the Burari case 2.0, the Dodwa family case, can be linked, of course. If you find, you can always link two things, right? But in my opinion, I really do not think that they are similar to that extent. What do you think, Rudrako?
Well, in my opinion, this is honestly a very it is human nature, because there is a phenomenon in science. I do not recall the precise name. It is likely pareidolia, according to which humans as creatures have a habit of finding patterns and recognizing patterns in whatever they see. We look at the moon and we see a man on it. We look at a wall and there are faces all over. So you look at a suicide that happens in hundreds all over the year, that just happened to happen on the 1st of July in 6 years, and it seems that the Burari case has happened again. So, as much as speculation goes, sure, it's fun to fantasize and theorize. But when logic takes a stance on this, there really isn't any true religious or psychotic motivation that comes around in these scenarios. Honestly, the entire scenario could entirely have been that one of the kids strangled the sister while she was trying to run away from the scene, and the rest of the family just decided to end themselves. While it is also a harrowing case of mental disorders shared within the family, it is not of the same flavor.
So another question that very well said, and another question I have is that, how do you think the media and the public has reacted to the Burari case versus the Dodwa case? Because I think there is something over there. I think the Dodwa case is only being blown up because of the link. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, sure. So, you know how any publicity is good publicity? It's like trying to soft launch a new actor using their parent who is a pre-existing actor. This is nepotism in police cases. They basically used the fame of the Burari case as a parent case to the new farmer case. The media, honestly, again, no shade there, but still need something to write about. And when you link some things, you get clicks, you get reads. Then from their perspective, why not, right? Why not draw a line that may or may not be there? Why not draw a line that you cannot really yet prove is clear? Because again, just like you cannot prove that just like you cannot prove that I will see a face in the wall whereas you won't. Similarly, you cannot prove that this is just not the Burari case repeated and they were just better at hiding their tracks this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting to see how media shapes the public perception. Media coverage can influence public opinion so much at this point. Sensationalist reporting can lead to widespread panic or fear. That is basically the primal way of our reporting at this point. And while more balanced and informative reporting can definitely help the public understand the complexities of such cases. In both instances, I think media played a crucial role in bringing attention to the mental health aspects and the potential dangers of unchecked beliefs and rituals. And if we dive deeper as we have, we can see that there are several factors at play here, and like you mentioned multiple times, and like I have mentioned, that there is a shared delusion psychosis that is going on over here, and family dynamics and family mental health on its own is such an ignored and underrated topic, because even though there has been a rise in discussing mental health for individuals, no one talks about how in a family where there is let's say a leader or someone who is the main person of the family, the head of the family, how much, if they are disturbed, that can lead down and influence the rest of the people, and that is basically the starting of the delusion. So there is something over there as well, something to learn over there. And also, there are a lot of social pressures and community expectations that can be significant. In many communities, there's a strong emphasis on maintaining a certain image or status, which, obviously we all know has led down to such pressure on individuals. And, in both families, in both cases, we have seen that they were perceived as devout and respectable people. And, that could have contributed to that pressure and to their reluctance to seek help. You wouldn't sit on the top. You wouldn't be the first ranker in your class and ask someone else for help. And though it may be completely normal and fine for you to have a doubt, but there is that pressure, that expectation of you to be that way, right? And supposedly they probably struggle this way. This societal pressure can exacerbate feelings of isolation and hopelessness, which is a very sobering thought if you think about it.
I mean, especially in a rural setting where you don't really have access to any resources whatsoever within the community, to reach out to anyone for whatever help whatsoever, that is a big contributor as to why the suicide rates are always pretty high around the rural areas, parallel to the declining agricultural incomes within the country. So, Shivangi, as we wrap up our discussion on the Burari deaths and the recent Madhya Pradesh case, right, what are your final thoughts?
I think honestly these cases are just tragic reminders of the importance of mental health and community support and the dangers of unchecked beliefs. Yes, religion is good for whoever they practice it. Yes, you should believe in something if you are that type of person, but it has to be checked in a way where people around you are not, if they are not, there's a easy way. If people are uncomfortable, a large mass of people are uncomfortable by what you are practicing, right, then maybe there is something to recheck over there, right? Then we must work collectively to create a society where mental health is prioritized and individuals feel supported and understood. And I think by fostering such open dialogues about what you are practicing and everything, educating the communities and providing these resources, and making them accessible, I think we can prevent such tragedies in the future. So it's crucial that we learn from these incidents.
True. That was very well formulated. It is definitely crucial that we learn from these incidents and take active steps within the communities to make sure people at least have somewhere to reach out to. Because even if it's 50 people being influenced by one thing, we just need one person to reach out to another outside of the community, and all of this could have been very easily avoided.
True, and this it was a very important and enlightening discussion, and I hope our listeners gain valuable insights and feel motivated to contribute to positive change in their communities. And thank you for joining me today, Rudrako, and sharing your insights. And also, again, thank you for our listeners for tuning in. And if you are someone or someone who is struggling with mental health issues, please seek help from a professional. And remember, there is no shame in asking for support. And you should stay safe. And aside from that, please subscribe to Mindbrews. We have a website as well where we post regularly. And we have blogs up there, and we have an Instagram channel as well called Mindbrews, and we will be having weekly podcasts, so please tune in every week. And remember, there is absolutely, again, no shame in asking for support. Stay safe and take care.
Bye.